Alright, let's do some D testing, chat, because I'm sure a lot of you are interested on how D will actually overall perform. I think at least making her MLB will help me kind of gauge her better compared to my other units, because like if we're gonna compare her with my other units, well, let's just say a 0 copy is not gonna do well comparatively. I think 1 copy of D is probably enough, because the whole shtick of her is she's buffing all the attackers. Right there. The D wallpaper. That's right. I'm gonna skill 4 Deez, which is expected actually. I wonder how much she amplifies our team. Let's try not using D. Okay, in this situation, I guess it's fine to burst with, like, say, I guess I'll burst with Scarlet. Seven, 5, 4, 1, 10, 12. That's with Alice, and then it becomes 7, 5, 1, 4. 12k versus 10k. With D, she's dealing a little bit more. That's for the 5 seconds, and then there should be a drop off here after the 5 seconds. That's because Litter's buff is not there anymore. So it's 7.5k. And then there should be a drop off after 5 seconds. This is when Litter's buff is gonna expire. 7.1k. And so we should still have Privaty's buff right now, but Litter's buff dropped off, so it's 7.1k. And then this is 7.5k. We still have D's buff. D has 15 seconds out of 40 seconds uptime, whereas Privaty has 20 seconds. That's true. Privaty has higher uptime because she is on full burst, while D is on just the same. Okay, but let me see here. D has 15 seconds only uptime. That's with the burst. She doesn't really affect the ally after that. This is better when you only need to destroy parts every 40 seconds. You could kind of say that way. So it's very situational. Overall, I think she's a very situational character. Actually, okay, just to give another example, right? You probably wouldn't use Privaty, right? So let's just put this in perspective. Although Privaty does the same thing as D, I probably won't use Privaty with my Scarlet and Modernia. I'll probably use Privaty with my Maxwell and Alice, and so that way my Scarlet and Modernia will probably, you know, they could work with D. The main thing who D would be good for to be paired with are units that where majority of their damage is reliant on auto attacks. She would be taking the burst tree's burst timing, so, and that's perfectly fine for like Modernia or for Scarlet, because Scarlet or Modernia's burst, they don't really provide that much to them. And so I think my overall opinion is she does provide a good niche. She's kind of like a buffer, and it's also against like body parts. So what kind of bosses is this going to be? Like Altizen, Modernia, units that have respawning body parts is probably good, or like have really high. Maybe like for Nihilister, she probably would have been okay also. She's not a top priority character. I wouldn't like pull her as like, okay, if I don't have any good DPS. If I want to min-max like my Union Raid potential, I think she will be good, because in Union Raid, destroying body parts, this could make or break like you actually destroying a body part. I think that if you're not using her to do burst to destroy body parts, then you're not using her the way she's intended to be. This is real, and her skill 2 is like I'll be honest, like that skill 2 is made for Modernia. You know it, I know it. This is made for Union Raid Modernia, because Modernia's Union Raid, I believe, is Iron type also. So yeah. Alright, so here's some paper mat that I kind of did just as I just finished my stream, and I kind of just wrote out and tried to do some calculations on how exactly D was working out. Well, the way I kind of see D's functionality is in the same way as sorta like Privaty, in a sense that she is a buffer, D is a buffer, and that's kind of how I view it. She is enabling the other units into becoming, you know, deal more damage. But the downside for this is D has to be the one bursting. It means that she's gonna take up the burst of one of your DPSs, and so the main redeeming factor for your DPS actually not has to be with their burst, but instead with their auto attacks. And to add to that, every time she bursts, there has to be some sort of parts that you are attacking. And so in the situations where the parts die fast enough, or there's no more parts to shoot, she will start falling off. So let's talk about a situation here. It takes about roughly 5 seconds to gather up enough burst energy from 0 to 100, and with litter or other CD reduction unit like Dala, Volume, you can burst every 15 seconds as long as there's no burst extension. Litter plus D actually deals way more damage than by 20% more, and this is also with just D having a burst at level 4. So let's talk about scenario 1. The scenario 1 that I want to talk about is, let's say I'm using litter plus D and then I'm bursting with a 20-second burst. So let's talk about like Scarlet, for example. The way it works is, let's say I want to burst with D first, and the burst rotation will be roughly around 20 seconds for the first burst and then roughly about 15 seconds on the second burst, because D has time extension. It will go from 15. Normally we can burst every 15 seconds as mentioned here, but because there's D, it'll take 20 seconds. And then when we burst with Scarlet, it'll only take roughly 15 seconds for the whole duration, from gathering the burst and then the entire duration of full burst. So let's talk about it. The way the timeline would go, I'm kind of just counting it. We're doing 5 seconds normal, and then we're doing 5 seconds with litter plus D, with 10 seconds of with D's buff and attacking. This is what my Modernia was hitting, and I'm just gonna assume that this is like the DPS, so damage per second. And so we're gonna go with that because it's all relative anyway. So let's just say under a vacuum where we have unlimited ammo and things like that, this is how much we're gonna be doing, right? And so, and then we have the normal attack, and then for the second rotation of the burst, we have 5 seconds of normal, 5 seconds with just litter, and then 5 seconds of just normal. So this is when Scarlet bursts. This is the entire duration when Scarlet bursts. You have 5 seconds of litter's buff, and then there's 5 seconds of where you don't really have any buff. And this is, we're looking at the snapshot of how much Modernia is damaging. Basically it's 1.1 mil, 1.16 mil. And let's say that, assuming that maybe the Deez bonus, that 5 seconds that we initially saved, we did an extra 5 seconds of normal attack, then that would add up roughly around 20,000. And if, let's say, for example, the burst, it allowed us to do another full burst with litter and D, then it would be at 60,000. So it would be the low roll is about, you know, 1.18, but if it's the high roll is if it's 1.2. So that's the general standard. Let's say we have D and then we have Scarlet bursting with the standard 30-second burst, and that's with litter. And so we are bursting every 20 seconds for 20 seconds and 15 seconds, right? Now let's take a look at another situation. What about, let's say, if we're bursting with Modernia, or we're not using litter. Let's say, you know, for some reason we have to use Pepper, for example. So we don't have any cooldown reduction unit, and this is the situation where if you don't have any cooldown reduction unit, D plus Modernia is actually not a bad combination on bursting, because you're not really missing out on the opportunity cost, because you're bursting every 20 seconds instead, because, you know, it will take 15 seconds to do a full burst with D and Modernia each time around, and then like 5 seconds to gather up the burst. And so, you know, here's the full burst uptime, yada yada. Do the math again. We have the timeline: 5 seconds of normal attack, and then 5 seconds with litter plus D, and then 10 seconds with D. So this is the total of 20 seconds on the first burst, and then 5 seconds on normal attack, 5 seconds on litter, 10 seconds with normal. Again, these are all kind of just like theoretical paper math, and this is, you know, assuming that everyone's just shooting constantly without mind of the bullets and everything like that, because, you know, that's kind of difficult to, the battle goes differently, so we're not going to be able to assume. So I'm just kind of doing estimates here, and in reality though, let's talk about this. Let's assume that I was using litter and then I was bursting with D and Modernia instead, so it helps for me because I don't have to use another calculator with like what's my damage with like pepper or you know, a different kind of buffer, maybe Miranda or something like that. What I ended up with is actually 1.17, so it is actually dealing less damage, and it makes sense because we are bursting longer and we have longer time where we're doing normal attack instead of like these other multiple multipliers. So what it ends up is we did less damage basically if you're bursting with D and Modernia, you know, every time that happens. Now, however, this is not really the opportunity cost that we're talking about when we're using D. What if we're not using D at all? Because the main thing about D is when we're getting her benefit when she's bursting. If she's not bursting, she's basically useless. She doesn't really provide anything else. You know, she has an initial 10-second or 5-second head start of, you don't have to energy burst, gather up the burst energy. So what does D have? If we're gonna replace D, who's the most likely unit that we are going to replace? And again, like I said, I was thinking about it. It's like, what if we use Privaty in this situation? So in this situation, D is kind of like acting like more as a buffer. The damage on her own, especially on enemies that she doesn't have an elemental advantage on. So let's just assume that we're not going to use her with a unit that she has no elemental advantage on. Then what exactly does she provide? Nothing really. Like in her skill 1 and skill 2, nothing really provides about it. So you have to burst with D. But then what about the situation where we're not bursting with D, and let's replace her with a substitute buffer? Typically it would be Drake, or could be Maxwell, could be Privaty. In this situation, I tried to use Privaty as an example, and basically paper math, you're bursting every 15 seconds. That's basically it. You have a 5 seconds of normal attack, and then there's a 5 seconds with litter and Privaty, and then there's 5 seconds with Privaty, and then 5 seconds with normal, and 5 seconds with litter and Privaty, and then 5 seconds with Privaty. What I ended up getting out of it is 1.3 mil basically. And to kind of wrap it up and kind of summarize it, the way that this is happening is because you are trading off the other buffs uptime. You know, you have your 10-second buffer, you have your litter, you have your litter's buff as well. They have less uptime when you have D, right? So I have these kind of calculated. Litter and buff uptime is like 28% with D, and then 10-second buffer, it's only 57%. And then with D and Modernia, you know, you have another thing, it's 25% with litter only, and then 50% on the full burst with D and Modernia bursting. But if you're not bursting with D, for example, and then you're using litter and or Dala or volume, or perhaps I guess in this situation Sakura is an option now as well, you have a lot more uptime on litter and the 10-second buffers, your Privaty, Maxwell, Drake. And so that's the trade-off that you're having if you're using D. And in general, you would deal less damage, I guess, in that situation, right? But something to keep in mind, again, D is the only option that D is providing, other than when she bursts, is that she will deal more damage if she is on element. That's the main thing about it. And I guess like in some situations, you know, Modernia or Train, where having an initial burst is actually a huge thing. That's when you can start seeing some slight difference in that situation. But let's give you a scenario. What if you cannot destroy those parts immediately? Well, for example, to give you an example is, what about Nihilister during Union Raid? Nihilister during Union Raid, she has her body parts have way higher HP. You can't destroy them immediately, and even if destroying them, it doesn't really do any different. Like, she's not gonna act differently as opposed to, say, I guess for Train or Modernia, if you destroy their core or their turrets immediately, then you're gonna be able to have like an easier time with the battle. So the way I see it is, again, Dee is a very situational character. She's not going to be necessarily use all in every situation. For players not competitive but who pays a little, is he not a good character? I would not, like, if you're not competitive, I would not go for Dee. Yeah, I think if you're a casual, you definitely do not need Dee, because Dee is only useful at very specific situations. And the thing is, there could be a, like, I think it's gonna be common, there's probably gonna be Union Raids where you're not gonna be using Dee at all. This is more increasing your arsenal, like, on different situations, specific situations. So like, if you're not competitive, I would not use Dee at all, because she is not gonna work in many situations. She's gonna work on very specific situations, elements that are iron bosses, and the boss has parts to break, are probably where she will shine the best. And then everything else, she's kind of mediocre. All right, that about wraps it up. And obviously these are just first impressions, so we will discover more about her as we do more testing. I'm pretty sure we will find a lot more different scenarios where we could take advantage of her kit. As usual, if you guys want to chill, come in and hang around at twitch.tv/KaiJLV. I will be chilling right there. Make sure to hit that like, sub, and leave a comment or whatever have you. But the main thing is, I'll be happy if you guys just come and chill at my Twitch. That's about it. I'll see you guys next time.